Hi, welcome to my weekly live stream. Today I want to talk about reconciling attachment theory with this concept from yoga of non-attachment. This is something I've been thinking about for a long time. My husband is a psychotherapist. I think many of you know that. And many of you here are also psychotherapists. Many of you are yoga professionals, and some of you are both psychotherapists and yoga professionals. So some of this might be familiar to you, but I think bringing together these two ideas from disparate disciplines can be really interesting, and it can help to reconcile some of the confusion. So the reason I started thinking about this live stream specifically was last week I had an email from someone who asked me about this very topic, like how can you be non-attached and still have a healthy relationship? And so I think it's really useful to dig into the topic a little bit. So let's start. I'm going to leave in the comment a couple of links. I'll leave in the comments that might be helpful in getting a little deeper into the topic. So the first thing is to be familiar with Bowlby's work, and he was the one who coined the term attachment theory, and then Mary Ainsworth did a lot of the actual studies subsequently, and this was happening in the 60s and 70s, which will be I'm going to come back to why that's relevant momentarily. But what they did was Mary brought all these children and parents into her lab, and she observed the way that they interacted. And when the mom or the caregiver had to leave the child, how did the child behave? And then also when the caregiver returned, how did the child behave? And so what she observed is basically 4 different kinds of attachment styles. There's secure attachment, where the child would be like, oh, mom's going, okay, cool. Mom's left before, and mom will come back. And so that's called a secure attachment. And usually the child doesn't have a reaction, doesn't have a big response to the parent leaving. So why is this relevant? Well, as adults, we bring that attachment style into our relationships, right? So if I wasn't securely attached as a child, then my tendency in my relationships is to feel that insecure attachment. Insecure attachment, she observed, again, comes in 2 forms. By the way, these experiments were replicated many times, so it was good science behind them. And so what she observed with insecure attachment is there are basically 2 forms of it. One is anxious, like feeling like mom's leaving, and I start to cry and I start to feel really clingy. And then when mom comes back, I might have that same kind of crying, clingy kind of response. And then there was avoidant attachment, which is like mom's leaving and I'm going to go avoid mom. There might be some reason to avoid that attachment. I'm using the word mom, but it could be any the primary caregiver. And so, how does that manifest in an adult relationship? It's really common to see, and it's typically, it could be either, but one partner will be, more clingy, and the other partner wants to go into the man cave or woman cave, whatever it is, and avoid, so it's very common to see those attachment styles. And then the 4th kind of attachment style that they identified is called disorganized attachment. And that is when the rules were changing all the time. Like sometimes you got good feedback, sometimes you weren't getting enough attention, sometimes it was secure, sometimes it was insecure. And what they found is with disorganized attachment, that's when you have people with the most serious kind of mental health challenges, right? So this plays out in our adult relationship, these attachment styles, right? And you can see them everywhere. And we can do things to help us overcome our attachment challenges by creating opportunities for secure attachment. Now, Dr. Bruce Perry talks about neurosequential model of therapeutics, where he says that the stuff that gets laid down in those first, even in utero, and then in those first couple of years of life is more brainstem. It's deeper in the brain, midbrain stuff. More difficult to change than it is the front brain is more plastic. But we can use the front brain and the changes we make in the front brain, and so much of what we do in yoga is very front brain, with mantra, with focus, with open monitoring, with focused attention, with all the different kinds of meditation, A lot of that is training the brain to change. So we can definitely change the brain, but it's harder in those deeper brain regions. And many of those get laid down. So you start to see that you go out with the same person all the time, or you marry the same person all the time, and you are having similar relational problems. And much of that is a representation or a reflection of those early patterning that has been set down. So what does this have to do with non-attachment? So the question that came to me last week was, how am I supposed to be non-attached to a child? This person was having some challenges in her relationship, was not being able to be, the intimate relationship broke up. She was not able to be with the child. So, this got me thinking about this idea of vairagya, non-attachment, and the Yoga Sutras say abhyas vairagya bam tannirodha, which means something like through practice and dispassion, that's how you become successful in yoga, right? How am I supposed to be non-attached when what the Western psychologists are saying is that attachment is what makes you happy, like good, secure attachment makes you happy? Then how are you supposed to be non-attached? It's so confusing, isn't it? And I think there is something to be said about the interpretation, whether it comes from Buddha or from Patanjali, the interpretation of non-attachment as meaning somehow kind of like distant and sort of like not invested. If you've ever had a child, you know what attachment is, and you know how you feel so intimately interwoven with that being, and feeling separate or trying to have this feeling of dispassion is very toxic for not only for the child, but also for you. It's a very inappropriate response. So I think dispassion, I think vairagya gets misinterpreted as meaning this sort of standoffishness. And it has been misinterpreted, I should say, for thousands of years. I think that that's been a problem that people have struggled with, ascetics have struggled with. I was in India many years ago, and I met this monk who had joined an order. I was staying at an ashram, and he had joined an order, and he was actually from the Netherlands. He was from, or somewhere, he was from Europe, I think it was the Netherlands. And he was just like this really fun, friendly guy, and he wasn't monkish, And I remember saying to him, like, why are you're so happy and so friendly, and where did that come from? And he said, wow, when I first became a monk, I had a different idea about what it means to become a monk. And I said, oh, really? And he said, I think the best way I can explain it to you is to tell you a story. I said, okay. So this is a story he told me. He said, when I first became a monk, I thought I was supposed to be like this monk. And this monk lived in an ashram. And one day he opened his door to the ashram, and he looked down and he saw a basket. And in the basket was a baby. And so he said, well, the fate has left this child here. So he took the child in, and the other monk said, what are you doing? And he said, well, I have to take care of this child. So be it. It's been left here. And oh gosh, that's the wrong story. Sorry. The wrong part of the story. The story was that the village people came and said, my daughter had a baby, and said, you are the father, so you have to take this baby. And he said, so be it. And he took the baby and he started taking care of the baby. And then about 10 years later, the village people came back and they said, wait, my daughter finally agreed that that was not your baby. It was a traveling man who was the father. So we made a mistake. Sorry, can we have the child back? And the monk said, so be it, and gave the daughter, gave the child back. And so this monk that I was talking to in India said, I thought that's what I was supposed to be like as a monk, just totally dispassionate about everything, totally non-attached to everything. And he said, but I changed as I meditated more, and I meditated in my heart, and I meditated on the divine. I developed a relationship with the divine. And through that relationship, through that attachment, he didn't say that, but this is essentially what was happening to him. He said, through that attachment, I started to realize that that wasn't the kind of monk I wanted to be. And I said, oh, okay, so what kind of monk did you want to be? And he said, well, I think I should tell you a story. And so the second story he told me was the beginning of how I messed up the story. He said, so there was another monk living in an ashram, and the village people came to the ashram. And no, not this time. The village people didn't come to the ashram. Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm getting so confused. One morning I went and I opened the door to the ashram, and looking down, there was a child. And I thought, oh my goodness, there's a child here. So I took the child into the ashram because I felt like it was divine intervention. I was supposed to be taking care of this child. And the abbot, or whatever you call it at a monastery, the guru at the monastery said, you know, God has shown you that you have to take this child in. So the monk took the child in and he raised the child. And she was 16. And when she was 16, a beautiful knight in shining armor came galloping up to the ashram. I don't know, I'm mixing up the cultures now, but this is the main point of the story. And said, I would like to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage. And the daughter was very much smitten and in love with the knight. So he courted her for a while, and then he took her back to his kingdom, and she rode off into the sunset with him. And as she rode off into the sunset, the monk realized he had endless tears coming down his face. And he said to his guru, the abbot of the ashram, he said, all these years I've been practicing meditation and I'm so attached, and I'm not supposed to be attached. And the guru said to him, as long as you are occupying a human body, you will experience all of the emotions of human existence. And so then the monk said to me, he said to me, I realized I was trying to be non-attached as a way to avoid the pain in my heart of separation. And he said, but I realized that I can never avoid that pain. As much as I meditate, as much as I am devoted to the spiritual path, I have to be willing to walk into my pain. I have to be willing to have that pain, because if I don't have that pain, then I will never have the experience of love. And I just remember feeling like, that's so beautiful, and such a beautiful person, and now I know I still am friends with him. Now he's in Africa. He lives in Africa, and he lives, amongst people that are very poor, and he digs wells, and he's just completely committed to doing service projects. Which reminds me of Africa. When you see pictures of African families, often I don't mean to be blanket about Africa, but in poor rural areas who have very little food, oftentimes what you see is this family with these like big smiles. Why? Because the family is so tight and attached, and it's through attachment, positive, secure attachment, knowing that the people around us love and support us, and through us creating that same environment for our children, for our partners. It's through attachment that people are happy. It's just human existence. So how do you reconcile this concept of non-attachment? In my opinion, the way we reconcile it is via a tantric understanding of the word attachment. And the tantrics would say that what we are attached to is the pure essence of being. St. Francis said, within each other, and St. Francis said your children are not your children. They're the sons and daughters of life longing for itself. That's what we become attached to. We become attached to, that's what I think the yogis would suggest. We become attached to the essence of life longing for itself, to the essence of spirit, to that which is intransigent, that which is eternal within each other. So we are attached to specific beings, but to see that being as a manifestation of life, as a manifestation of the deepest source of the deepest, most benevolent, most beneficent source of love in the universe, that's secure attachment, I believe. And I believe that we can give that to each other. And I believe that we deepen that as we practice, as we do the practices, particularly the practices of meditation that connect us to that which is eternal within us. So I suggest it's the tantric definition that's so useful of attachment. So I'm going to read some of the comments here and see if there's any questions. Cecile said, I'm not sure why I wait for these. I always seem to miss the first 3 to 5 minutes. So listen again. Cecile, I always try to kind of just like have a little intro, but sometimes I don't. I don't always succeed at that. So that looks like it for the comments. I want to thank you all for joining me. There were a couple other comments, but it was just things like, it's interesting. I hope this is useful for you. It's something that's really close to my heart, and I love mental health so much. I love mental health and psychology theory so much, and I love yoga and yoga theory so much. So I think it's really useful to bring them together and see how they can support and help each other. You know, it's not about not being attached. It's about being attached to that part of ourselves that's so of each other that is so eternal. And I also think letting go of attachment to the material things is super helpful in that journey as well, because the material stuff can just leave at any moment. You know, it's the that which is eternal within each other, within our pets, you know, in Gaia, in the world, that's where we really find the true